Good morning, my name is Kayla Fernandez, and today I will be discussing to what extent does the execution of the death penalty in the United States affect crime rates as seen in the course of the last 30 years. My claim is, as seen through academic research, it is believed that the execution of the death penalty throughout the United States is correlated in little to no way when it comes to the rise or drop of crime rates in the last 30 years. I want to begin with this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. that says, "How does one determine whether a law is just or unjust? A just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law or the law of God. An unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law." This basically means, how are we as humans supposed to make laws that are deemed good or bad for the public when we ourselves have many different aspects of things? First, what is the death penalty? The death penalty is the punishment of execution administered to someone legally convicted of a capital crime. And these things include espionage, treason, and death resulting from aircraft hijacking. But most of the death penalty cases come from murder or genocide. The Eighth Amendment, according to Cornell Law School, prohibits cruel and unusual punishments. Now, this was passed in 1790 by James Madison, and it was passed basically to trump the death penalty, but in the end, the courts had decided that the death penalty was constitutional, but according to Cornell Law School, the Eighth Amendment does shape certain procedural aspects regarding when a jury may use the death penalty and how it can be carried out. As seen by this timeline that I made using Tom Head's article from ThoughtCo, a timeline of capital punishment in the United States first begins in 1608 when a Jamestown council member faces a firing squad for alleged espionage activity. Then when in 1790, as said before, James Madison passes the Eighth Amendment, but doesn't trump the death penalty and just shapes it into what it is and what it is going to be today. Where in 1888, the first execution by electric chair is seen in the public. In 1924, they first introduced gas chambers, where it was used until 1977 when the lethal injection was introduced and puts an end to the use of gas chambers. And now from 2000 to present, lethal injection is the most used form of execution in the United States with very few exceptions. Now, since 1976, there have been 1,493 executions according to the Death Penalty Information Center. In 76, there was 0, but in 1977, as seen with the introduction of lethal injection, there was 1, and as time goes by, it gradually goes up, with 1999 having 98 executions being the highest number seen. And as it gradually goes down, there was only 25 in 2018, and so far in 2019, there's only been 3. The first court case I want to talk about is Kennedy v Louisiana. And this man, as you can see here, Patrick Kennedy, was convicted for the aggravated rape of his 8-year-old stepdaughter, who afterward required immediate surgery and ended up in the hospital for a very long time. And although there was no intention of murder and she did not die, the judge still decided to convict him with the death penalty, and they claimed that this was unconstitutional since there was no intent of murder and he did not murder her. But the judge still passed it, claiming that it did not violate the Eighth Amendment. The second court case I want to talk about is Bays v. Reeves, where 2 men had claimed that the lethal injection method of execution was unconstitutional and a form of unusual and cruel punishment under the Eighth Amendment. Yet the Supreme Court still upheld that it was constitutional and that it didn't violate the Eighth Amendment at all, since it was seen as more of a peaceful form of execution. Now the real question is, does murder rate go up without capital punishment? This quote from John Donahue, a law professor at Stanford University who has done a number of studies regarding the death penalty. He says that the idea that the death penalty will reduce crime rates is a little bit like saying that rain dancing is going to produce rain. He also mentions that it is probably about as strong as finding as you can get. There is no statistical study that has given us any reason that the death penalty reduces murder. He also mentions that the death penalty does not even guarantee our public safety. He also mentions that the comparison of murder rates between states that have the death penalty and states that don't tend to show that the state's use of capital punishment has no bearing on the rate of murders. And this is a study that I found on Death Penalty Information Center, which asked the public, do executions lower homicide rates? 5% of the public said yes, 7% had no opinion, and 88% of the public believed that no, that executions do not correlate with the homicide rates. Another thing I want to talk about is the innocent rates of people who have already been executed. As you can see, there have been cases where people will be executed and later on it was found out that they are actually not even guilty. 29 being in Florida, which is the highest number seen now, and from Arkansas to Washington there have only been 1 so far. But since 1973 there have been 160 cases where people are released from death row before death because they have been found innocent. Now, many people that do believe that the capital punishment does reduce murder rates usually back it up by saying that many states without the death penalty have higher murder rates than others. But these statistics back up that the states that impose death penalty continue to have the highest murder rates compared to the ones that don't, with only 3 that don't have the capital punishment being ranked in the top 25. As you can see here, Louisiana, a state that does have the death penalty, has the highest number of murder rates in 2016, as opposed to the ones that don't have death penalty having lower numbers than most seen here. My solution is that the capital punishment should be abolished due to the fact that the academic inquiry shown has proven that it doesn't lower crime rates throughout the United States. I want to finish off with this quote. Before we act, we need the best possible scientific assessment, otherwise we risk making matters worse. We must use science to cast the light ahead so that we can move step by step in the right direction. Now, Margaret Thatcher said this, and I believe that before people talk about how capital punishment may reduce or bring a rise in homicide rates, we should take into consideration all the scientific research that has already been done and that has proven that it is unnecessary at this point. Thank you. What are your questions?
All right, 2 questions for you. Thank you, by the way. First question, what information did you need before you began your research, and how did that shape how you went?
At first, I didn't know what states did and didn't have the death penalty, so the first thing I had searched up was which ones do and which ones don't, and I found out that 30 states do have the death penalty and 20 don't, and that changed a lot of the way that I went with my research, because knowing that information is not assuming that all the states had death penalty, which is what I thought was the way that I went, but I found out that each state has a different ruling of its own.
And next question, if you had more time, what additional research would you conduct related to this topic?
I would look at more court cases, because a lot of the court cases that I did look at, they mostly related completely to the 8th Amendment instead of the death penalty itself. But those 2 court cases I feel were good because it was more challenging how the death penalty worked, and then finding out it's a very complicated process where the Supreme Court has to decide whether it's just or unjust in some cases.
You're done, bro.